In this episode, we're going to be talking about sex.
Welcome to Thriving Launch with Louise Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
How would you like to be able to interview world-class experts, sit down and have chats with people like Jack Canfield, Marianne Williamson, Robert Kiyosaki, Tim Ferriss, you name it? Would you love to interview other people that you really admire and consider to be your heroes? Well, we've created a course for you that teaches you how to podcast, how to set it all up, and how to get going so that you can really have a successful show and you can do it properly. Over at thrivinglaunch.com, we have a podcasting course, and it's there for you, waiting for you to snatch it up. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com and let me teach you how to podcast the right way. Today, we're going to be talking about sex and sexual communication. To do that, we've brought on sex educator, sex geek, author, speaker, just wild, zany, crazy guy, Reid Mihalko. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. We're really going to delve into the taboo, the unspoken, and what should be spoken and what shouldn't be taboo. So without further ado, let's welcome Reid Mihalko to the show.
Hey, we're here with Reid Mihalko. It's so great to have you on the show. Welcome, Reid.
Yay! Thanks.
Yay! Well, I want to just dive right in because you're the sex geek, right? So let's talk about sex. And one thing that's really important in the bedroom is communication. And if people are new to the realms of communication, it can be kind of awkward. And I would love to hear what you recommend about opening up communication in the bedroom.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way to simplify this the most is that our ability to say what we're not saying, and this isn't just in the bedroom, but in life in general, your ability to be able to figure out what you're not saying, either because you're afraid or whatever's keeping you from speaking up, identifying it, being able to put it into words, like get it clear, and then being able to communicate that, especially to the people that you're in intimate relations with, that's a skill set that just transforms lives, period. Because we all grew up in a time and in cultures all over the planet where we're not supposed to be talking about stuff because we're supposed to not rock the boat or make people upset or ask for too much or be a burden, all these things that keep people from sharing. And then in a sex negative culture, that gets augmented and we end up not talking about the sex that we want or the adjustment that I wish you could make in bed because that thing that you think makes me feel great actually kind of annoys me. And over time, that ends up eroding the connection and the intimacy and starts building resentment in relationships and in sex lives. So the idea that, being able to figure out what you need to communicate and then have the courage to put it into words, that transforms sex lives too, because we're not talking about sex for the most part in our culture, unless it's like pop culture and media. And then those conversations usually aren't really high quality conversations about, sexual empowerment and intimacy. And then what we end up doing is because we're afraid to talk about stuff and we don't know what to do, we turn to porn to try to get, role modeling for how to be better in bed. And porn's an entertainment medium, not an educational medium. And so people are picking up even worse cues in the bedroom because we don't talk about media literacy when it comes to porn.
Well, isn't that the truth?
Listening to you talk really reminds me of the interview that we had with Tristan Taormino and her whole conversation around sexuality and kind of the skewed perspectives we have around sex. And so, I know that early on for me, when I first began to have sex, it was a confusing experience for me because I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to say, wait, it's supposed to feel different, or, I want this and I don't want that. How can we get in touch with our desires and then be able to communicate that? What have you learned?
Well, for me personally, I think there's kind of like 2 or 3 main things that are kind of going on all at the same time. One is a somatic practice. Like, can you actually slow down enough to be in your own body? And what are the things that you're doing on a daily or weekly basis to get better at being able to feel more? And that's tricky for people because, feeling more means your body or your emotional history wants to come up and be felt. And there's some stuff that, most of us have had crappy stuff happen to us in our lives. And we don't really want to feel that. We only want to feel the good stuff, which is kind of what leads to a lot of people self-medicating and using substances and certain activities to try to augment or shift their blood chemistry or their brain chemistry in a way where things are just euphoric. And it's really just an escape mechanism to try to not have to feel all the crappy stuff. And the irony is, if you want to feel greater amounts of ecstasy and pleasure and orgasmic pleasure, you actually practice feeling, which means you feel the crappier stuff in life too. The thing that we don't talk about is when you get really good at feeling just feelings and emotions and sensation, you move through the crappy stuff faster. And, you kind of do, I guess the analogy is that people kind of do this unintentional version of hoarding all the negative feelings that they don't want to feel. And then your lives become very cramped and crowded. And if you could just feel all the crappy stuff and get rid of it, kind of the emotional version of feng shui, you would have so much more room in your life for the ecstasy, for the pleasure, for the, orgasmicness of life. But we just don't approach it like that in this culture, or in a lot of cultures, in fact.
It's interesting because as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking about women that I know that have incredibly difficult times having orgasms. And one of the things that, if I'm a listener listening to this, I'm noticing that we've started talking about sex right away, and yet none of it has really been about sex specifically. It's been about learning how to tune into your feelings, ask what's going on for you, become embodied. Have you found that this work also helps women and men who have difficult times being orgasmic or being aroused?
Yeah, it does, because what ends up happening, that first stage that I was talking about when, can you just get in your body and practice feeling your feelings? When you get yourself to heightened states of arousal, the blood chemistry that you're releasing also just makes you more vulnerable and you feel more connected, which is pretty much the setting to let your body feel the crappy stuff too. There's the euphoria of crying during sex or after sex because you're just so happy. There's also the euphoria that sex can create where you're releasing a ton of old stuff that may or may not be resolved. And it's my belief that learning how to feel your feelings is that feelings just want to be felt. And you can kind of like burn through them or burn them off or release them. And you end up becoming, I think, a healthier and better person, rather than devoting a lot of your energy to kind of moving this really heavy manhole cover lid over your pelvis so that you don't have to move all that energy around. The visual that comes to mind is like when you're cleaning a swimming pool for the new swim season, the water's gonna get cloudy when you start dredging up that old stuff off the bottom of the pool. But the benefit is that when you do that cleaning process and moving sexual energy around and just being able to feel pleasure is circulating a lot of the stuff, you can start pulling up that old crappy stuff from the bottom and get rid of it so that your pool is pristine. And then what ends up happening is you also have the emotional capacity to deal with upset and negative things when they show up in your life. rather than stacking that stuff on top of these towering piles of unfelt emotions, which can feel really explosive for a lot of people and feel really dangerous. And then your only alternative is to just practice feeling less and less. And that sucks in bed as a practice. And I think that that's kind of where, for men and for women, we start really kind of closing off our abilities to feel anything. And then that limits arousal, limits orgasm, things like that. And then there's just a lot of emotional shame and blame and the sex negativism of culture that's kind of stacked on top of all that. So it's a complex situation from one perspective, but it's also a bunch of really simple things kind of stacked on top of each other. And if you can untangle them and deal with them, step by step, you can make tremendous progress. And, it's never too late to start learning how to feel more pleasure, have better sex, be a better communicator, and learn how to listen to other people's bodies in ways where then, the bedroom just becomes a playground.
Oh, this is such an important piece because there's this opportunity, intimacy, and being in the bedroom calls us and invites us to slow down, to feel our bodies, to actually experience what is happening. And the thing about engaging sexually is that oftentimes if we do slow down enough, then those feelings come up and we start to experience all new sensations. And one thing that I know you talk about is boosting confidence in the bedroom. And one thing that I see a lot of people approaching sex from this perspective of, oh, I need to be sexy and alluring and like this very kind of surface level thing where you're just trying to like get a lot of stimulation and tantalizing, but then you miss the opportunity to drop in more and feel more. So I'm curious about, how do people have the confidence in the bedroom? What do you say about that? How do you have the confidence in the bedroom without approaching with, oh, I'm gonna just lay out my whole toolkit of all my techniques?
Yeah. So in any learning process, and again, like for listeners, like this is all my opinion. Like if anything that I'm sharing, if it really resonates with you, then take it, integrate it, run with it. If there's anything that you're just sitting there listening, being like, my God, he's completely full of crap, and you disagree with it completely, don't use that tool or that perspective. Like, I'm not here to be like, I have figured out everything and you must obey. Like, because that's bullshit too. And as an expert.
Well, I'm sorry, we have to go. We can't have you on the show if you don't have it all figured out.
But this is the thing, right? I think this is a much larger topic, and this is the geek in me, right? We're moving into an era of self-discovery and self-expression. So the guru model of I have all the answers, I personally think is bullshit. What I think is we need to be, those of us who are, air quotes, I'm making air quotes right now, who are experts. Really what we're here to do is ideally we find the best tools out there, show you how to use these tools, at least the beginning versions, because you may come up with other ways of using these tools, and then set everyone loose to go build the lives and the sex lives that they want. For me to give you a hammer and a screwdriver and say that you can only build a house that must look exactly like this, or you are wrong, is really just kind of copy and pasting old, forms of control and models that, like we find, for example, in organized religion. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So dogma, I have a very distasteful, kind of reaction to dogma. What I want is kind of like open source software, kind of hacking and geeking out and playing. And if I give you a soccer ball, you're not doing it wrong if you don't go play soccer. Like, go play with each other. I'm not attached to what you create for yourselves. And I think that evolution and what's evolved in relationships and in sex is, are you having the love life and the sex life that makes you happiest?
Reid, I want to jump in too, because what you're saying is really special to me. And that is one of the top reasons why when I saw your work, I knew I had to reach out and we had to get you on the show, because you're really doing a lot of work that's breakthrough. You're helping people find different avenues for expression. And at no time have I ever heard you say, this is the way, or this is a better way. I've just heard you say, this is another way. And for some people, it's a better way. And for others, there isn't. And then what I love on top of that is that you've geeked out on different modalities and said, this one works for this one works for that. And you can blend them and you can play with them. You know, I want to let you continue. I just want to jump in there for the listener and tell you that if you come across Reid's work, that's one of the top things that you're going to get. And that's why we wanted him on the show.
Thank you. And it kind of, to bring it back to like biblical proportions, because dogma I think dogma had its place, and we've grown sufficiently as a species in some parts of the world where it's not about surviving in the same way that it was several hundred years ago. And we're moving into kind of thriving in a certain way. There's still a lot of work to be done. There, sexism and racism and all kinds of phobias and isms are still rampant all over the world. So for me as a dork and a nerd, sex is one of the hardest things for people to talk about and to feel unashamed about. And so for me, in my life journey, kind of figuring out who I am and being able to reclaim and my agency and empower myself around the kind of sex and relationships I want, and to truly feel like I can love myself. Whatever your listeners are, whatever your self-expressions and whoever you want to date and whatever your fantasies are, if you can start to learn how to talk about these things and share them with the people that you want to explore these things with, that courage and ability trickles into the rest of your life in all areas. I could have picked, talking about money, because that's another area where there's a lot of shame and weirdness. But for me, it was sex. And so this is my niche and where I like to dork out. So again, like the tools and the perspectives, I think some people are out there kind of holding on to this guru model that doesn't really empower people. It's rather than me just give you a fish, like, can I actually teach you how to fish? And can I teach you how to deconstruct fishing so that you'll maybe think of an even better way of being a fisher person than I could ever have occurred. And that kind of open source type thing, it is, I want to see more of that, certainly in my industry, in the sex and relationship world. But I think that is what's gonna, evolve humanity in really heartfelt, compassionate, kind of Star Trek kind of ways, where we're all just kind of kicking ass together as a race, as a species. And that's just me being a nerd. But I think it's possible. And for me to sit here and tell and put fear into people and tell them that they're doing it wrong and be really dogmatic about something, aren't I just reinforcing all the sex negative bullshit and failure stuff and fear mongering that got us in this place in the first place?
Yeah, I think one of the really important things that you're saying is the communication piece, and bringing in more communication into the bedroom and even outside of the bedroom, being able to say, look, Luis, I'm really looking for opportunities for us to slow down together more, to breathe together more, or just being able to share what's happening in real time. If something's uncomfortable, I think that you watch these movies where women are just kind of laying there and the man is kind of doing his thing and you can tell she's not liking it. And so there's this opportunity moment by moment to communicate with our bodies and with our words what we're actually wanting.
Yeah, and then sex becomes truly a creative process. It doesn't have to be, creative, procreative for birth and things like that, but the kind of collaborative and creative energy of sexual play is really exciting. And then you start, adding in, distinctions and tools that maybe you never grew up with, like the distinction between, like, one of the things I teach in one online course, and in a lot of workshops too, is this distinction between sensual and erotic. And the way that I use the two words, sensual for me is about sensation. Like, what kinds of ways do you like to be touched? Where do you like to be touched? What positions do you like to be in that allow you to feel the things that make you excited, that make you happy, that feel good, right? And also understanding that for some people, what feels good to them can be really extreme forms of sensation, which some of us, I'm not very kinky. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look like it feels good. But for somebody else's nervous system, oh my goodness, that feels delightful. And then, so there's the sensual, and then there's the erotic. Like, what are those things that turn your brain on? Is it the scene? Is it the setting? What are the thoughts that arouse you? And, so maybe, you like the sensation of being spanked or, having somebody go down on you. But if they're wearing a pirate costume, oh my goodness, it's turbocharged. How great to be spanked by a pirate, or whatever it is. Like, for some of us in the sacred sexuality realm, what's erotic is the rose petals and the candles and, the incense and sitting in yab yum. And then you can access this whole idea of ritual as being, a way of anchoring certain states of mind and getting you into your groove. And so for me, as a geek, if it's the rose petals and the chanting that gets you into your groove and turns you on and opens you up so you can feel more things, I really don't think that's more evolved than, you like to be tied up and blindfolded, or, whatever that is for you. But if you don't start to break it down and realize, oh, there's the sensation here of that's working for me, and then there's the what's working for my brain, if you can start to separate those two so that you can teach your lovers how to use them together, so that you yourself know more about yourself and can teach your lovers and your play partners how to co-create with you. Not only are you getting to start to have the sex that really starts turning you on, but at the same time, you're role modeling for your lovers that they can speak up about the things that maybe they didn't realize about themselves.
Well, this is a really fascinating topic, the way that you kind of delineated that. And I don't know if it's a spectrum, but I definitely tend way more to the sensual side. And that's why I want to ask this next question, because I think it is so important, is the quality of touch and how we touch people. I mean, it's different. People don't always realize that there's different types of touch. There's different textures and pressures and consciousness in your fingertips even. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about touch.
So the quick version of starting to break down touch, or one way to start looking at it, thinking about it, there's how you're touching, and then there's also where the person that you're touching, where are they in their own body? Where are they in their mind? Where's their blood chemistry at? So, like a great example for anybody who's listening, male or female or however you identify, because, in geeky areas of the world now, gender is being deconstructed, which means that gender roles and ideas of masculinity and femininity, for some people are very flexible, right? But however you identify, whatever, you happen to have under your pajamas, when you start touching yourself and you're not aroused yet, the quality of sensation feels very different than when you are highly aroused. So the next time that you masturbate or explore yourself, just notice what the sensation feels like when you're just getting revved up versus when you're revved up and your erectile tissue is engorged, and your arousal centers of your brain are all lit up. to notice that touch feels different in those states allows you to start to realize, oh, when I'm touching somebody else, some of this is going to change depending on where they are in their state of arousal, like where their body is actually, the joke being like, my body is ready. Is it really ready? Or do you just say it's ready and you don't really even have an embodiment practice? So you wouldn't even know what ready is because you've never given yourself the time to really explore higher states of arousal. So what you can do as a lover is you can slow down the process and really enjoy exploring with a partner different kinds of touch, light fingertip type sensations, the light kind of kisses, and, maybe even like the kind of Eskimo angel type kisses where you're using your tip of your nose, your eyelashes, where you're using your whole body to like lightly explore people and create sensation. And then the difference between like light sensation and then more firm touch, where you're using pressure and weight, and playing with how that feels for your partner, or having them do it to you and you witnessing like what's the difference and what that feels like, and seeing and exploring like different types of touch in different areas on your body at different states of arousal, which kind of sounds complex. But once you kind of get the different things that you're focusing on, there's only like three things you're really focusing on: the types of touch, where in their arousal state, where they are, and then just like, how much you and they are actually in your bodies. And this opens up this idea of like being able to listen to your partner or have them being able to listen to you. And this is where there's so much room, because even if you just get 10% better at any of this, you start opening and unlocking doors of possibility and sensation that probably like my mom and dad never even got to. It just wasn't a conversation.
There was a couple that came to my office, and after sitting with them for a little bit, the husband just kind of blurted out, we don't have sex anymore, and when we do, it's horrible. And his wife looked kind of shocked that he even brought that up. And then he just said, and when we do have sex, she just lays there like a corpse, and it just doesn't work, and I'm tired of it. And she just broke down and started crying. And this was such a taboo subject. I mean, it was very palpable in the room that this was a taboo topic to talk about. And this is where they ended up, because they had both held in within themselves their desires, wants, and abilities. They just didn't have the capability to open up this conversation. And so we had to slow down, and I had to ask, okay, well, what does intimacy mean to you? It obviously means this to you, speaking to the husband. What does it mean to you, to the woman? And it took a lot of coaxing out of her, kind of what it meant for her. And it was a brand new type of conversation for them. And so it was either the previous choice before our session was, we don't have sex, or if we do, we don't really talk about it and it's not what we want, or we don't have it and we don't talk about it.
Yeah. And if you look at how most people grew up and the way that culture deals with sex and intimacy, what most people then realize is that they're normal because everybody's going through this. Like, we're all fish swimming in water and we're wet, but the fish doesn't know it's wet because it's never known what dry feels like. So when you start to realize how we got here, you can start undoing it and start having the conversations. And we just need to be gentle with each other and patient, because at first it's going to be really hard to have a conversation, because how do you know what to talk about when you never even knew you could talk about it in the first place, and you didn't have the tools to even consider what some of the answers to these questions are? And this is where it can be really useful to take workshops or courses, or hire somebody to be your coach, and to have us basically be like your Sherpa or your guide in starting to map out these questions or learn better questions to ask. And when you start to open this stuff up and you realize like, oh, well, actually what really turns me on, honey, is me giving oral sex to you. And when you start kind of getting clear on what the things are that you think turn you on, or even the things that you just want to explore, because sometimes the reason you want to go do something is, I've never done that before. And this is another thing that's really useful just for American culture, certainly, and I think other cultures, is if you try something and you don't like it, you're not broken. You probably just don't like it. And that's a win. And we have this overachievingness that crept into the bedroom from American society, where if you don't like absolutely every kind of sex that there is, then somehow you're unevolved. And that's not the case. You're not unevolved. You're allowed to like the things you like, and you're allowed to not like the things you don't like. And you can be in a healthy relationship and like different things. And, the favorite thing for your partner might be the thing that you hate the most. And you can still have a relationship. There's lots of other crayons in the crayon box of sex.
I think you're giving a lot of permission and freedom, because what you're saying is this opportunity to explore sexuality with a sense of curiosity, like an adventure, like a child would explore something new. And that way we can continue to approach sex from this space of discovery rather than formulaic. This is what happens after you do this, and then this is what you have to do to turn me on. When we can actually just discover what's needed in every moment, then we can tap into the deeper feelings that are there and what desires are actually coming through moment by moment.
Yeah, and this is where it's tricky, where people teach sex from a very masculine, feminine place, men this, women that. It's not that it's wrong, it's just very incomplete now that we're moving into this new era. Because what ends up happening when you teach things from this kind of polarity, in a kind of David Data kind of way, can be problematic. It works really great for the people that it resonates for. However, what happens when, I personally get so, old that I can't get an erection? How do I fuck my wife into God then? In a culture that's very penis erection centric, and penis in vagina centric, I'd rather reframe sex in the way that you were mentioning, in this kind of, this is play and discovery and what feels good and what's possible right now, because things will shift. Maybe, like I injured my hip, a couple of years ago. And so certain sexual positions that were really fun for me were kind of impossible for a while I was healing. Does that mean I was a failure at sex? And do I have the mental flexibility and the understanding of what feels good for me and also what doesn't feel good to be able to take care of my body and still be able to play and explore? Because when you come from those perspectives, then you can role model that our bodies will change over time. Our preferences will change over time. Things that turned us on when 10 years ago may be like meh, 10 years from now. And I think that this is where we're really kind of getting into this conversation about, allowing your sex life to be alive and to shift and to grow. And, and the analogy that pops into my head right now is like it seems normal that you wouldn't treat like a 2-year-old, you expect to change as they grow, and you're not going to continue treating them like a 2-year-old. So like, how about we have that kind of flexibility and that openness and that kind of approach to our bodies and our sex lives and how we make love and how we explore. And to me, that seems a lot more inspiring. It might feel daunting, but it only feels daunting because no one showed you the tools yet. Once I show you how to use a hammer and a screwdriver and a saw, go build the sex life that you want. And, and hopefully build it with somebody who enjoys building a sex life too. Because there are going to be people out there who kind of like sex isn't going to be their thing. And that's okay as well. we have too much shame and too much judgment around certainly around sex and intimacy. And I would like to see that shift.
I love how the beginning of this conversation, though it was about sex, really the beginning of the conversation was let's learn how to express ourselves and get in touch with our desires. Mm-hmm. And what is the channel to do so? Let's get in touch with our bodies, feel it, and then notice what's there for us. And then because we've learned how to say, hey, what feels good to me, and ask those questions and then kind of play around with that, then learning how to say that to our partner. And it's funny because we can talk about sex, but we can also apply this to any area in our relationships. We can talk about money. What feels good to you? What works for you? Where do you have some hidden shame around that, and how you do that too? So it's such a larger thing that we're talking about. And when you were talking about this, some of the boxes that we can get locked into, I know that when I came across David Data's work, it was a very short amount of time that I spent in it, literally just a few YouTube videos. I was like, oh, masculine and feminine. That's the answer. That's why I'm having problems. I've got to be more masculine. And I tried that, right? And it just didn't work for me because I'm generally more of like kind of a soft, centered, sensitive male. And then the funny thing is when I went back to, okay, what feels good to me? What's natural for me? Where do I shine? Oh, I shine being the guy who's sensitive and who likes expressing his feelings. Once I went to that space, I was also able to play around with my partners and go, I actually kind of like it when you tell me what's on your mind and you tell me what you want, and I think that's also something that I know Kamala appreciates, is that I make it a point to have her and sometimes push her to bring out some of those like masculine, and I mean, doing the quotations here, the Reid quotations, the masculine quality of asking for what she wants and kind of pushing her out of that, zone of, maybe we can't ask for what we want because I'm a woman. And it's just, we have a lot of fun with that, of messing around with like roles, and she
just
can
do me, damn it.
yeah, where she gets to ask what she wants.
Yeah, and this is what's interesting, right? Because so I would and again, I'm not poo-pooing on David Data. His work is important. Everybody's work's important, but it's all part of a bigger soup of the dynamics of relating. And to say that, the only tool you need is a hammer, this one type of dogma or perspective, when all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And I'm much more interested in teaching people, here are the best tools, the most useful tools that seem to be helping the most, and what are, the essential tools you need to create healthy, thriving relationships. And then like go and give people the permission to go and run and create. And for me, it's so much of it comes down to communication and being able to use your words, because in a culture that was silenced around sex and sensual self-expression, words are very, very powerful. Very powerful. They're very powerful for combating shame. They're very powerful for those of you listeners who are woo-woo, for manifesting and creating and opening containers and things like that. I mean, we could debate, but for the most part, as a reductive statement, silence is only really good for being a good listener. But silence never really helped anybody be more empowered when it came to their sexuality. So using your words and being able to communicate.
I had the opportunity when I was in college to travel to France and study postmodernism art. And there's a famous artist named Deschamps who took a pipe and flipped it upside down, took a picture and wrote the words underneath it, "Is it a pipe?" It's an incredibly famous piece of artwork. And what that time period and Deschamps is famous for is taking things and then asking questions and saying, well, why can't that be artwork? Why can't that experience be considered an artistic experience? Why can't we play with this in a new way? so many great things happen because of that type of questioning. And here we have a dialogue that is very similar to that. We've been asking, is it a pipe? Does it have to be used in that way? Just because you've been taught this way, is it the way that works for you? And what would it be like to ask new questions?
I'm curious, what is it that you want to...
And then, of course, there's the obvious dick joke in the pipe.
Well, maybe that's post-production. We can add something in there. What is one last thing that you'd like to leave our audience with?
This is an ongoing journey, and you're going to get better at all these things. There are resources out there, especially around skill sets, so that you can understand people's bodies, you can understand your own body, you can understand arousal, and you can feel more confident about certain kinds of sex that you might want to explore, or the ones that you already enjoy. You can always get better at things. And that confidence will lead to a higher level of competency, which then creates what we talk about in psychology as the confidence-competence loop. And then as you learn new things and kind of get over your learning curve hump, where the anxiety of tracking all this new information and am I doing it right and this and that, eventually that stuff starts to fade away. And then you're just kind of being able to riff and play with people with these new skills. So if people are interested in that stuff, they can go to readaboutsex.com, which is REID aboutsex.com. There's a bunch of different things if they click on the store for different programs and online courses. There's lots of free videos that they can sign up for. And if people are interested in better communication tools and the beginnings of learning how to get better at sex, but through the doorway of intimacy and connected communication, then they can also go to relationship10x.com and sign up for some free videos that I will geek out with them on. And then I'll invite them after they get a taste of how I teach to sign up for an online course if that's something that they like.
This has been an incredible conversation. Thanks so much, Reid. You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there. Be sure to tune in to the next episode where we talk with Alberto Velodo about gratitude. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating on